please consider supporting Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. David Dewayne Fugate was a 48-year-old from Covington, Ohio. He had recently lost his wife and was a military veteran. On February 29th, 2020, David's brother went over to David's house expecting to find him there. David wasn't home. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. If there is one thing you should learn about disappearances after listening to Unfound for any amount of time, it's any person can go missing anywhere at any time. No one is immune. No location is immune. No day is immune. Would you like some examples? I knew that you would. Dominique Holly Grisham went missing just an hour before his own birthday party. Jason Jolkowski, famously or infamously, went missing during a half-mile walk in broad daylight in a nice neighborhood in Nebraska. Trevelyan Evans went missing from a little town in Wales where no violence occurs. Milda McQuillan went missing in her car when she was just a mile from her destination. And how about all the people who called for rides or help, then weren't there when people showed up? Shane Fell, Deborah Bowman, Kevin Newen, Jesse Farber, Molly Miller, and Colt Haynes. And there could be a few more in that category. Well, with David Fugate, we have another scenario that to the public seems impossible. Yet it happened. Could anybody have ever predicted we would ever combine a funeral and a disappearance? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. David Fugate had a biological brother, but his parents ended up adopting six siblings for them, with the range of oldest to youngest being 30 years. David went to the military and was in and out of it for 12 years. What finally caused his final exit was David had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and PTSD. But there had been causes and signs of both before David ever joined. For example, he had a girl in high school die in his arms after she had a seizure while swimming. Still, David had been married a couple of times and had a son. Sadly, his current wife, Julie, died 2 days before David's disappearance. So, on February 29th, 2020, preparations for Julie's funeral were underway, with David's mother helping him. She called him at 7 a.m. to make plans for that day. David sounded himself, and the belief was he was at home. However, when David's brother Daryl showed up at the house at approximately 10 a.m., David wasn't there, despite his wife's car, which David had been driving, being in the garage. David's wedding ring was on a bedroom dresser, and his phone was on the arm of a chair on the back porch. He was never seen again. Later, the next-door neighbor would say that not long before Daryl got there, this neighbor had to go over and turn the volume down on the radio on David's porch. It was that loud. He did not see David. In addition, Daryl determined that many of David's clothes were missing. All of us have had deaths in our families. The experience is traumatic, the worst. Yet, my perception is very few people end up disappearing due to the emotions of losing a partner. contemplate why this is, while also trying to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, when people with mental health issues run off, they don't usually take their clothes, do they? Number 2, if David left on foot, why didn't a security camera on that street capture him? And number 3, does this disappearance start and end with a disagreement over David's truck? David's family isn't sure what to think about what happened that day. The guest for this episode is David's brother, Daryl Fugate. Unfound News. Tonight, April 26th, I'll be at the Clearwater Capitol Theater to see a true crime presentation called Psychology of Serial Killers. It is hosted by Dr. Rachel Tolles. I'll let you know what I thought of it on Monday's live show on YouTube. Next, it's the end of the month, so be looking for the next Unfound Now, where I analyze a recent disappearance. You will find it on Unfound's YouTube channel. Finally, just since last Friday's update episode, there was a development in the disappearances of Susan and Natasha Carter. Their remains have been found on Larry Webb's property. They were found on the same exact day that Larry Webb died. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the brother of David Fugate, Daryl Fugate. Daryl, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Let's just start here. Just give, of course, being that you are David's brother, just give an overall view of, your family, the Fugates, growing up all together. How many kids are there, etc. Why don't we start there? Just whatever you want to say.
Well, my mom and dad raised me and the brothers missing. We're biological, but then my mom and dad adopted 6 other kids.
Wow.
Throughout the years, like 30 years.
Oh, my goodness.
They were foster parents at the beginning. And they raised all of us pretty much the same. And, we all grew up, and everyone's out of the house now and on their own.
Wow. Adopted 6.
Yes.
They must be very giving people, Daryl.
Yes, very, very giving.
Wow.
My mom, she passed away last year, June of last year, and we really miss her a lot.
Yeah.
And she, every day, or not every day, but every week, she would ask me if I knew anything about David, if anything's been heard or said or anything. And I said, no, Mom, nothing's been said.
Right. These 6 kids, what are the ages? Are you and David would be the oldest? All these kids were younger than you two?
Yes. I'm the oldest, 55. My brother that's missing, David, is 53.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other kids are span between, I'm thinking around 45 to 22.
Wow. That is amazing. And do you all keep in contact with each other? And I was adopted, so maybe it's more fascinating to me than most people. You keep all in contact with each other and everything?
Yes. I actually rent to my one brother right next to me. I rent to him, the youngest one.
Mm-hmm.
And I rent to him, and we talk every now and then. And then I got a brother that lives in Texas, got a brother that lives in California, got a brother that lives in West Virginia.
Wow.
And then the 2 girls live here. One's in Troy and one's in Kettering.
Wow. That is amazing, man. That is amazing, Daryl. And everybody should know, I'm just hearing about this now. I'm not faking my amazement. This is something I know you, in our prior conversation, Daryl talked about having some other siblings besides David, but I didn't know there were 6 of them, and they were all, I guess, adopted. So that is really amazing. Good for you. Good for your parents. Fantastic story. Very interesting. Okay. Let's move, of course, the reason we're here, unfortunately, because David is missing. Let's just talk a little bit about David. Talk about maybe growing up with him. Of course, you got all these other kids, too. But, what was David into? Personality, interests? Was he into sports, into music? What was David's interests and personality?
Oh, he loved his Ford truck. He loved his Ford truck. He had a F-150, I think, Ford truck, and he loved it. He leased it and stuff, and he also loved football. What is it? Indiana Colts. He loved the Indiana Colts.
Yeah.
Indianapolis Colts, and pretty much he liked to watch football, loved to watch NASCAR races, and I'm not sure who he was on NASCAR, but I know he liked to watch it a lot, him and his wife.
Okay. What about growing up with him? Maybe being that you're just 2 years older than him, going back to high school or whatever. What do you remember back then?
Well, I remember, he was a grade under me. We both graduated from this. We both graduated from JVS. It's like I graduated like machine trades, and he graduated from electronics. And we both graduated from JVS. We wanted to make a career out of it. He never made a career out of that, and I never made a career out of my machine trades. But I became a truck driver, and then he went into the Army for he went 4 years, and then he got out, wanted to make a career out of something, but then he ended up going back in like 2 other times.
Wow!
So he had 12 years in the Army as a communications. I think he got out as a E6 or E5.
Okay.
Sergeant.
All right, so he went into the Army kind of late teens, early 20s, like most people do, like in that time?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember maybe, just as an example, do you remember where he was stationed? Did he stay mostly in the United States, or was he overseas? What did he do? Do you remember?
He started out in Texas, and he spent a little bit of time in Texas. Then he went to Germany. Then he went to, I believe it's North Korea. I don't know which side's I know he was there for a while, like 2 or 3 years in Korea.
In South Korea. Surely not in North Korea. I don't know if any Americans are allowed there these days. But maybe in South Korea?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Coincidentally, my dad was stationed there way back in the 1950s. Okay. Would you say that surprised you, maybe him going into the military or not?
Well, I was in the Army National Guard.
Oh, you were.
And he seen me in my uniform, and that did it for him. He wanted to be in the military.
Okay.
I mean, I went to Georgia, Fort Benning, and then he ended up going to Texas for his basic training. But yeah, as soon as he seen me graduate and how built I was and how stout I was, it was like that did it for him. He wanted to look that great.
That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what he wanted.
That's interesting. Okay. And as far as relationships, you of course already talked about that he was married, and we're going to get into the death of his wife, which happened right around the time that he went missing. But do you remember how they met? Or did they grow up together? Did he run into her while he was stationed somewhere in the Army? What do you know about that? How'd they meet?
Actually, we grew up with her and her brother, Jason. And we grew up with them. They lived probably about a block away from us throughout the childhood.
Yeah.
Now, Dave really wasn't interested in her back then. He went through 2 marriages.
Okay.
And then they ended up after he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and PTSD in the military, and he got out, they got together and then got married, and I think they was married a good 12 years or so.
Okay, before she died and he disappeared.
Yes.
Okay. David have any kids?
Yes, he has a son in Georgia.
He does.
His name is Bradley, and he had a stepson. Shoot, I can't remember his name.
That's fine.
Shoot.
Was he close? I'll just ask you. Was he? That's fine. Was he close with them, or did they keep in contact, or anything like that? Do you know?
Bradley moved to Georgia, so his mom took him to Georgia, so they wasn't really very close. Even after he grew up, he did move back for a little bit, but then he moved right back to Georgia. He stayed with Dave and Julie for a little bit, but then he missed Georgia, so he moved back.
Okay.
And
right. Okay. And how old would you say these kids are roughly? Once again, if he wasn't around them too much, maybe you haven't been around them too much either, but just roughly, how old do you think these kids are? Maybe into their 30s now, something like that? Maybe
yeah, Dave had him at 17.
Wow.
Bradley. So he would be, what, 35?
About 35 now. Man, he had him young, Daryl, 17 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he had now the other kid that was Julie's, is Julie's biological kid. His dad was out of the picture for the longest time and never did get back in the picture. And then Dave kind of not really adopting like paperwork or anything, but he was his dad, and he treated him just like he was any other kid that he would ever have. And it really destroyed him when he got killed in a car accident when he was 16 out on 48. He accidentally, being young, he wasn't paying attention, pulled out on somebody, and it killed him instantly at 16.
Yeah.
So that kind of hurt Dave too,
for sure.
And Julie.
Of course. Of course.
They were on vacation at the time and had to rush back. Totally destroyed both of them.
I'm sure. Yeah. A lot of kids. Yes. It's dangerous roads out there for everybody, but it does seem, for younger people, it's just a little more dangerous. How about you and he as adults? How much were you seeing him? How much, did you live close to him? You said, I know that you're a truck driver. I don't know how long you've been doing that, but did you have a lot of, times to interact with him, over the years, just say like in the 2000s? Did you see a lot of each other?
Yes, we, being a truck driver, and then, I'd call him up every now and then, want to hang out, or we could have supper together, or go out to have a drink or something. We did that every now and then. But, yeah, we, most of the time, he pretty much stayed to himself a little bit, but then he did want to get out and hang out with me and stuff. We would go up to the Eagles and hang out with Julie's mom and dad, and we would, me and Julie and him would also hang out, at different places and stuff, and
Okay. How often, just to give the listeners an idea, how often would you say that you were seeing him? Maybe in the preceding 5 years before he went missing, how often would you see him? Once a week, once a month? How often do you think?
Well, at the end there, when Julie was in the hospital and everything, I was seeing him every single day because I moved in to help him out with rent because, he had medical bills that he had to pay for and stuff on her. And so I moved. I moved in probably 3 weeks prior. So in that 3 weeks, we seen each other every day. But before that, we would see each other once a week.
Okay.
Pretty much.
All right. Very good. Let's move on to this. You've kind of already mentioned it. We have to talk about it. And that is David's mental health. It sounds to me, the impression that I've gotten is that this is something that he had struggled with for a long time. And do you remember the first time you maybe thought, or maybe even David even told you, I'm having some mental health issues? And, what do you remember about that first time?
Well, the very first time I remember him having some issues, and we didn't really pinpoint it at that time,
Mm-hmm.
but he had stopped in my place, and I looked outside. I said, "Where's your car at?" And he said, "Oh, it ran out of gas up at Joyland." That was when Joyland is no longer there anymore.
Okay.
But it's a restaurant, and he said he came in and he said, "Yeah, I ran out of gas up there. Hey, could you run me up to get some gas?" And then I said, "Sure, let me get dressed and stuff." So when I came back out, I took him up there. I was getting ready to take him to the gas station. She said, "Oh, well, why do we need gas?" I said, "Because you told me you needed gas for your car. It ran out of gas." And then he kind of blew it off, and he said, "No, just drop me off at my car, and I'll get it. I'm good." And so
Wow.
I dropped him off at his car, and I was just sitting there talking to him for a little bit in his car. I said, "What happened to your dash, or not your dash, but your console?" And it had a big hole out of it. And he said, "Oh, I was trying to get something and I couldn't get to it, so I cut it open." And I thought that was really weird.
Wow.
To cut your console like that,
Of course.
with a big hole in it.
Yeah.
And just little things like that started coming up. That he was very paranoid. He actually got fired from a place because he thought they was dousing him with gasoline and trying to set him on fire. Different things like that,
When
time,
maybe I should ask you, when did this first incident when he said he needed gas, but I guess he really didn't? How long ago was that? I mean, was that in 2000, or how long back ago? Just roughly a year, 1990s. What does the time strike you?
Yeah, so he got out a total about 13, 14 years, 12 years in, but he, off and on. So he went in his 20s, so it'd be when he was so it'd be about, I'm thinking 20 years ago.
All right, 20 years ago. So early 2000s. We're just going to pick out a year just roughly to put this in a timeline. Roughly around 2004 then. Roughly. Yeah.
Yes.
It very well could be earlier, a little later, but we'll just to give everybody an idea how long this had been going on. Did David ever get at some point did David realize something was going on and got help? Or was this something, of course we know a lot of people who have mental health issues don't think they have any problems. What was David's situation?
Okay, so he got out of the military. That was right after he got out of the military.
Yeah.
So he came home and was living with my mom, and then he would come out and hang out with me and stuff. But this was within a year after he got out. Well, Mom realized something was wrong, and he told her that they kicked him out for accusing a sergeant or something. Anyways, she went and started checking into it, doing a little investigation and stuff, and come to find out that they kicked him out because he tried to deck a sergeant. Well, they did a diagnosis on him right before he got out, and they even posted that he was paranoid schizophrenic in the thing. So when the military let him go, they just kicked him out and thought that, it's not our problem. So anyways, Mom did an investigation and then ended up fighting for him to get his disability, military disability, because, it wasn't right that they kicked him out. So she fought for him, and he ended up getting 100% disability and 100% Social Security disability too. Okay. So that's what he was living on throughout the years since 20 years ago.
Okay.
Was
he taking medication? You did say PTSD. So did something happen to him? I mean, we know, of course, that mental health can be very genetic, But PTSD, of course, is usually brought on by some sort of trauma that somebody experienced. Is it like that, or what? I know you're not a medical professional, but the best you can tell.
Well, to be honest, I don't know what would brought the PTSD on.
Okay.
We don't know that he had any. Well, there was something that happened when he was a kid, as a teenager.
Okay.
A girl died in his arms, so that could have been part of it.
Oh my!
But it didn't show up until after he was way in the military. So I don't know if that would, that many years later would have done that. Yeah, it really. He talked about that a little bit about it really hurt him because it was one of his best friends. It was a girl that he was kind of seeing and stuff. So
what I gotta ask, what happened to her? Did she die of a disease, or did she what happened to her?
They was over there swimming at one of his friend's house, and she had a seizure underneath the water and drowned.
Oh,
and so that was really bad. It was a girl I knew, a girl he knew.
Yeah.
It was really a bad situation. He didn't. It was just something that happened that he ended up pulling her out, and she died in his arms.
Wow. Once again, this is something that Daryl and I had not talked about before. Of course, that could have been very traumatic, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things do take a while maybe to set in. So maybe what you're saying here, just maybe didn't affect him right at the time, is certainly something that I'm open to. All right, so going back to the paranoid schizophrenia, so he was diagnosed with that. Did David acknowledge this? Did he accept that he had it? Did he have to take medication for it? Did he realize that, this is something I'm going to have to manage for the rest of my life? How do you think he looked at that diagnosis?
Well, he knew that there was something wrong, but he also kind of felt like that he really didn't need the medication. But then he would get a shot every once a month or every 2 months from the military, the Veterans Administration in Dayton, Ohio. He would go down there and get the shot every month. Now, before he would get the shot, he would be kind of jittery, the medication was wearing off. Yeah. So he would go down there and get the shot, and talk to the counselor and stuff like that, to see if he needed his doses upped or lowered or anything like that. So he was getting, he did get the shots from the VA, and was on medication.
Okay. Anybody that would, if he was on his medication, and if a stranger were to meet him, would they know that something was going on, or did he seem like a person who had no mental health issues like that?
He acted like a person that didn't have no mental health issues.
Okay. Very good. Now, you did say he was getting some benefits from the military and for disability and everything. So because of this, was he not able to work, or what was he doing for employment, like within the last 10 years before he went missing? What was he doing?
He didn't work.
Okay.
But the VA was talking to him about, you can volunteer. He volunteered a little bit, but he didn't volunteer a lot, as far as being a disabled vet.
Yeah.
They encourage disabled vets to give their time to the VA or any other organization.
Sure. Yeah, right. And how do you think his wife, was his wife like keeping up on him, saying, hey, David, you got to get your shots and everything? I mean, was she keeping up with that with him, making sure he was following the protocol?
Yes, she was. She was making sure, and he was also on pills too. I forgot about that. He was on pills they took to keep it kind of leveled out, and he would get the shot at the VA. So I don't know how many medications he was on as far as taking the pills every day, but yeah, she would make sure that she would lay his pills out, and he would take them every day.
All right. Maybe I should ask, did she have a job? Was she working?
No, she wasn't. She did have a job probably 3 years before that, before she passed.
Yeah.
But it was up at the Eagles, and she was like a cook that helped out and stuff. But then she ended up giving it up because she had a weight loss thing that she went through, and she had lost a lot of weight. You know, it was getting to her before she got the weight loss thing done to her. And it was getting to her to stand for that amount of time because she was a pretty big lady.
Okay. All right. So she had her own health issues. Of course, we know that we're going to get into her death here in a moment. But so she was having her own health issues. Of course, David's having his, of course, as long as he stayed on his medication, he was fine. But she was struggling with some things as well.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe going back to David's mental health just for one more moment. You did tell me the story about at some point he went to Nashville, like out of nowhere. What exactly happened? What do you remember about this story? My understanding is this was like maybe 20 years before he went missing, or maybe more. But he went to Nashville, said he wanted to be in country music, but then he called your father to come pick him up. What was that story?
It was before he got diagnosed. It was in between, I believe it was in between when he got out of the military, but then he went back in eventually. Okay. I'm not sure how in between that. So it was a good 25, 30 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyways, he went to, that was before he was on medication and before anything. He just thought he wanted to be a country music singer. He thought he'd head down to Nashville, didn't have no money, pretty much called mom and dad up. He didn't have no money to get home. They went down and got him somehow. I'm not sure if he went there in a bus or how he got there. I'm pretty sure he probably went on a bus. He just, paid for the ticket, and then he got down there and realized that he was stuck, So they eventually went down and got him and brought him back to Ohio.
Okay, and he did say he wanted to go to Nashville to be a country music star or something. Did he say he really said that?
Yes, he really said that.
Okay. All right, I got to ask, did he have any music background?
Yes, he did.
He did.
Okay. He was singing he had a actual, what do you call it, tutor or someone that would help him with his notes and stuff when he was in church. Mm-hmm. We used to go to church a lot. Our whole family's Pentecostal through my mom, and he would sing Beulah Land and different songs, and he sounded really good. When he was around the teenager years and stuff, and he really liked singing, but it was just one of them things that he loved to do. Me, I couldn't get up in front of everybody at church or nothing like that, but he could. He loved being up there and singing and doing different stuff. And we was both in the choir. Now, I was in the choir too, but I didn't mind getting in front of everybody when there's people around, that I was singing with, but he liked singing by himself up there or with a choir, in church.
Okay. All right, so maybe it's not totally crazy if he's into music, went down there, but somehow he gets down there and then has to get picked up. All right. So let's move on to this. Just one more thing. We're just going to talk about this guy in general. We're not going to say his last name. Who is Joe? He's going to come up here a little later. But how did Joe and David know each other?
They knew each other from high school. Pretty much back then. Dave and him were pretty much into marijuana a lot in school and out of school. You know, they grew up together, and then pretty much, you know, that I don't know the particulars. I've never done marijuana, but you know, Dave and Joe and a lot of other kids were into that in high school. So I don't know if that would have anything to do with mental health.
But he knew Joe. They went to high school they went to high school together, and they were friends all those years.
Yes.
Okay. And he lived kind of close to where David and his wife ended up living?
Yes, within a couple miles.
Okay.
From each other.
All right, and what's going to come up later is Joe had David's truck. Do you know the circumstances under which Joe was driving David's truck? What the reason was? Did you know anything about that? Did David ever tell you why Joe had his truck?
Yes, Joe's truck went down. I don't know what happened to it, but Dave loaned him his truck, but he never got another truck or got another vehicle. And then Dave loaned it to him, but he had it for so long that he went to him and said, "I want my truck back. You got to do something. This is getting ridiculous." There was conversations on his phone where Joe got mad at him about because Dave wanted his truck back, and Dave was driving Julie's car, you know, and stuff. And so, anyways, the truck was, when we finally got it back from Joe after Dave disappeared, it was just trash. It was there was a lot of it was just messy, and Dave would never had his truck like that, you know. And that was part of it too, that Dave was mad because he had trashed his truck inside and out, you know. Mud all over it. He went mudding with it. He did stuff that he shouldn't have done. You know, I couldn't borrow someone's vehicle and tear it up like that. I really couldn't.
Right.
And then I would expect to get off my butt and get another vehicle and give the truck back to him. But Joe wasn't that way. He was like, he expected Dave to do what he wanted him to do. You know, kind of like overbearing over him.
Okay.
You know.
All right. So Joe had Dave's truck, and once again, that's going to become relevant a little later. All right, so we got the situation that David and his wife are living together. She's also having struggling with some mental issues, although as long as he's on his medication, he's fine. But she's having some physical health issues and lost some weight. Maybe that was bad for her. And so they're living there, though, in Covington, Ohio. And I guess some of your family lived in the area as well, including you, Daryl?
Yes. My mom and dad lived Pleasant Hill. And then I lived with my brother. You know, I moved in 2 weeks. I had lived with mom and dad, and then Dave asked me if I would be willing to help him, and I said, sure, I have no problem with that. So I moved in probably 2-3 weeks prior to Julie passing. Okay. And then I think that's about it. Okay. Regarding her death, and we have to remember that the accepted disappearance date coincidentally is February 29th, so the leap day of 2020, but she died just a couple days before that, so like the 26th or 27th, something like that. Yes, she did. Okay. On a Thursday. Excuse me? Thursday. It was a Thursday. On a Thursday. Oh, okay. Yes. So was this something that was sudden? I mean, it sounds like she had some health issues. Was this something that was terminal? Or was everybody expecting her to live for another 20 years and it was sudden? Or was this something that was expected? You know, should she have some terminal disease? Once again, I don't want to get too deep into, but I just want to give an idea of what everybody's attitude was toward her death or before she died. Yeah, she, you know, obviously she had some health issues, sugar diabetes and different stuff. But when she had the weight loss surgery, and then she had lost all that weight. She had went in to clip her underneath her arms because she had a lot of skin hanging.
Mm-hmm.
They botched the surgery and got an infection in it, and that's what started all of her health issues. It seemed like it really got infected, and then she went into a hospital, and then I believe my whole family believes that it was the start of the COVID at that time, because she kept saying that she couldn't taste her food. She didn't feel like eating. Just different. Oh, they put her on a ventilator because she was having breathing issues. A lot of other things too that came out of the COVID later on. So, and then they did transport her to like 2 or 3 different hospitals to try to figure out what was going on. Maybe another hospital, maybe they could figure it out. And then they transported her into a what do you call it? Not a hospital, but a old folks home, or
a hospice. Hospice.
Not really hospice, but a elderly, not elderly. What am I trying to think?
Some sort of home where they thought that she was going to recover or not.
Yeah, they was trying to make her comfortable and everything, and then maybe they, long-term facility where they could keep more of an eye on her and stuff, or something like that.
Okay. But then she died.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, I know this is a very obvious question, but I have to ask it anyway. How did that affect David?
He was really depressed and really quiet about the night before. The night before he disappeared, I just tapped him on his knee and said, "It'll be all right, buddy. We'll get through this." And he was really quiet. He never responded, never really. And then he said he was going to go to Joe's to spend the night, and that's the last time I spoke to him. Is because he was really quiet and everything that night.
All right. So just so we understand this setup. So she's in this home of some type, but you're living with him at his place. You're with him. Maybe you moved in maybe to help out or something, but you were actually under the roof, the same roof as he was, like the day before his disappearance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then he decided just out of nowhere that he was going to go over to Joe's.
Yes.
All right. Did that surprise you?
No, he would go over there every now and then and spend the night and stuff. Didn't really surprise me a lot at all, because he always spent a lot of time with Joe for some reason.
Okay, so he's there with you. No, so I think we have to just think of it this way: he's there with you. You're his brother, but then in this time, and of course the funeral hasn't even happened yet. He wants to go over and hang out with Joe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did Joe know David's wife very well?
Yeah. He knew her well, but she did not like him. Okay. And there's a lot of people don't like Joe.
Okay. Okay.
So, they always had their issues because she was trying to boss Dave around, or he was trying to boss Dave around and different things and stuff, and she would step in and they'd get in arguments and everything like that.
Okay. So after he left and went to Joe's, what did you do?
I stayed at my mom. I went out to my mom's and stayed the night there. And then I think I walked in at 9:30 or 10 in the morning at his apartment. He gave me a key to get in, and I had given money for rent and stuff because it was close to the end of the month. And I just came home, and I thought it was really weird that he wasn't there yet.
Okay. Let me ask you just a couple more things, being that she died. Who was in charge of making the funeral arrangements? She died, like you said, on a Thursday. Maybe I'll have to check and see what the actual date would have been for Thursday at the end of February of 2020. But who was making the funeral arrangements? Who was calling up, the funeral home and doing all of that?
My mom and Dave went over Friday at some time, and they both walked through with the funeral director, everything that needed bought and everything. She didn't have no life insurance, so he was struggling with that. They didn't have no life insurance, so he was doing his best to try to figure out if he had to go get a loan and this and that and everything.
Right.
On that.
All right. So, and when was, I guess the funeral did end up happening, correct? Even though, of course, he went missing before. This was so unique. So did the funeral happen like March 2nd, March 3rd, or it did happen? There was a viewing?
Yes, there was a viewing. Pretty much the funeral director got everything set up. It was supposed to I think it was either Monday or Tuesday it happened. Everything was all set up as of Friday. I don't know the real specifics about the money issue, but when we all showed up for the viewing and stuff, Julie's dad ended up paying the rest of the money to the funeral director to cover all the costs. And my sister helped out with the opening and closing of the grave.
Okay.
So, that was all covered, and Dave was really appreciative of both of them helping out. So I think most of it, everything was pretty much covered.
Yeah.
I'm not sure all the specifics of if, Dave went missing, and then did he talk to Julie's dad about paying the rest, or I don't know the specifics on that.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So, but he and your mother went down. They made these arrangements, but he disappears before this funeral ever happened. So I have to ask, and we're going to get into the actual day, but let's just jump ahead a little bit. The funeral happens. Of course, Dave's not there. What was everybody saying at that point?
There was some comments like, how can he just walk off without, with this all going on and stuff. And, my family and her family was upset. My family wasn't really, we was worried that, well, what happened? We don't know. It was like we was in, going through a funeral and then Dave missing at the same time. It was like, it was overwhelming on, we loved her, but then, it overwhelmed, like, why did he do this or what happened, it was just overwhelming on kind of, we was all wanting to grieve over her, but then we was also wondering what happened to him,
Of course. Okay. So we're probably going to come back to that. So let's, just wanted to maybe have to ask that question right now, because a lot of people are probably on their minds that he goes missing and then the funeral happens. Well, what was the reaction? Everybody, they're going to the funeral for Dave's wife and Dave isn't there. Maybe I should ask you this. I won't get to that later. That's fine. Let's go to that. So he decides to go to Joe's. You're there when he does so. You go over to your mother's. And then the next morning, my understanding, once again, from what you've told me in a prior conversation, is that your mother called Dave. And what was the conversation?
Most of the conversation that she relayed to me, I don't know everything that was said, but the conversation mostly based on Demanda, my sister, her helping him out with the opening and closing of the burial site. He was really appreciative that she could help him out on that, and that's pretty much what they discussed, is what I was told.
Okay, and during that call, so Dave had a cell phone, right? She called him on his cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. During this conversation, did David say, or did your mother get an impression on where he was when this phone call occurred? Do you know?
Yes, he said he was at home, that he had just walked in the door about 7:30.
Okay.
And, yeah, he was at home is what he told her.
Okay, so he says he's at home, the place that he was just the day before. So presumably, he goes to Joe's, maybe stays overnight, maybe just is there till 2 or 3 in the morning or something. But at 7:30, 8 o'clock that morning, he's back at his home, the place where you were living with him for the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay. Mother say what his disposition was, how he sounded, and what does she remember?
She said he sounded upbeat and everything due to the circumstances, that he didn't sound like he was depressed or anything like that at that time.
Okay. So the next thing that occurs is that you told me that the neighbor had to go over and shut off a loud radio, I guess, that was on the back porch or something. Of course, you're living there now, so you know the premises very well. Of course, lived there for a while back then. When did you find out first about this neighbor's story? When did this first come up?
After I called my mom to wonder if he was over there, and she said no, but I called Joe, and so she called Joe, and then Joe said that he wasn't with him either, and then Joe got a hold of this other guy, and they both came over about an hour later, and then we all was scrambling on this guy went out back, found his cell phone on the armrest of the chair, and then so we went around town next door in different places, and that's when I found out, when I talked to the guy, that he had came over that early that morning, about, I'm thinking 8 or 8:30, and shut because of blaring out back on his patio. Right. So the guy just turned it off and then walked back to his apartment next door.
Okay. Maybe I should, this is maybe I have to establish this. When did somebody realize that Dave was missing? So, your mother talks to him, and then what was the time that everybody realized he was missing?
It had to be about 10 or 11 o'clock. After I got home about at his place at 9:30, and then about 10:30 or 11, I realized that, well, where's Dave at? So I started calling around because I was kind of getting worried. Yeah. I didn't know that I didn't even pay attention if the car was in the garage or anything at that time. I had just, got a shower, was playing around on my phone, stuff like that, stuff up, and that's it.
Okay. So you went to your mother's, then that next morning you come back over there. I guess you're expecting to see Dave.
Yes.
But he's not there.
No.
All right. Now we have to remember Joe has Dave's truck, but Dave's wife had this car, and her car was there.
Yes, I didn't realize it until we started searching around the whole apartment and in the back, in the back and thing. Didn't realize that his car was there until then.
Okay. So you get there around 10:30, 11. He's not there. And did you try calling him, or was his phone there in the place?
Oh, I tried calling him, and everybody tried calling him, but I was inside, and that was out back, so I didn't hear the phone back there.
Back there.
Because it was outside.
Okay. So the phone was in the back. And then you already stated, eventually found out that this neighbor had gone over there because the radio was blaring. Is this some sort of little radio that was plugged into the wall outside on the porch or something? Something like that?
Yeah, it's kind of like a boom box, so it was pretty loud.
Okay. All right, so what you're also saying here, I think, Daryl, is that people realized that something wasn't right pretty quickly.
Yes.
Within a few hours, maybe 3 hours.
Yes. Okay. And then, I went on Facebook and posted, anybody see my brother, blah, 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 and then started calling people left and right. And then these people seen it on Facebook. They stopped by and asked me if I had a picture of him, they could go over and make copies and put it on a poster. And then they started handing out posters or flyers to everybody in town and in Troy and different places.
Okay. All right, so you're looking for him. Of course, you're calling him, but we'll get to the phone a little bit later. But you're calling him, not realizing maybe, at least at first, that the phone's sitting back there maybe by where the radio is. But it should be noted, though, you just said that you were over there, but who else came over to his place during that general time?
It was Joe and Seth. Seth's the one that actually found his phone on the back porch on the armrest.
Oh, okay.
Of the...
Okay, so you did not find it. Somebody else found it back there.
Yes.
All right.
Seth did.
All right, and just very in general terms, once again, no last names. Who is Seth?
Seth is a friend of Joe's, and Dave knew him through Joe, so it was kind of an acquaintance of Joe, and then Dave got to know him and stuff, and helped him out a couple of times. Driving him back and forth to work and different things.
But Joe and Seth showed up because you called them and said that Dave was missing. Is that why they showed up?
My mom, actually, I called my mom. She had Joe's number, so she's the one that called Joe. And then Joe and Seth showed up at the apartment, started looking for him.
So you encountered them when they showed up, in your opinion, their demeanor?
Seth was pretty, upset about it, I could say. Now Joe was kind of calm, but Seth was all, we got to find him, But my mom told me later on that the reason he might have did that is because his dad committed suicide. Oh. And Dave was in that way. I didn't know that until later on.
That might make sense. Yeah. All right. So he was
very upset. He got the police over there, and he did a lot of getting people over there for searches and stuff like that. And we actually did a search down at the river. Me, Joe, and Seth, and a couple other people walked down there, or actually drove down there, and started searching along the river and stuff.
Okay. All right, so all these people were over there. You're over there, Seth's over there, Joe's over there trying to figure out what happened. Police get informed. Just being that you had lived there for a few weeks before this happened, anything that you, any signs of, just very specifically, any signs of violence, like anything on the floor, anything broken, anything like that?
No, nothing. Nothing.
All right. And my understanding is at some point, dogs came in to kind of sniff everything out. And I'll be doing a map video just so everybody can kind of see what we're talking about here. But where did the dogs go? My understanding is they did pick up something. Listeners know I'm not a big fan of dogs in this situation. I love dogs, but when it comes to missing persons, I'm fairly skeptical. But what did the dogs do when they were brought over?
I showed them some articles of clothing of Dave's. It was mainly a ball cap, like winter ball cap, and they sniffed it, and then they went out back and went along the fence line onto some. It was a field, and through a field onto a lady's property. They said I didn't go with them, but they said be best if everybody stayed back, and then they let them do their thing. And then went on to another property, stopped at that one property, and then went on to another piece of property, and then they lost the scent, they said.
Okay. And being that probably hardly, maybe a few people live in the Covington, Ohio area, some of the listeners, but for everybody else, how far would you say the dogs went from the house before they lost the scent? Would you say a football field, eighth of a mile, quarter of a mile. How far would you say?
2 football fields.
All right, about 600 feet then, 700 feet. Okay, so not really technically, I guess, that far. Okay. The way you, once again, being that you live there, did this trail go by any other houses, by any other buildings where people would have been in, where it's a business or a home, where people could have seen him? Your opinion?
Not from the road. It was kind of secluded. Now, I'm not sure how far it is from the main road, and if you could, and I can't remember if beans were up or corn was up at that time. I'm pretty sure it was. I don't know. I don't think it was. I think it was all cut down, so it was pretty. You could probably see from the road that someone was walking that way.
Okay. All right, so maybe it's a path that maybe was going out of the way of running into anybody. Might look at it that way.
Yes.
Okay. All right, but then the dogs lost the trail. Did the dog handlers give any reason? Once again, if you were there, if you know, if you don't, that's fine. Did they give any reason why the dogs might have lost the trail right at that spot?
No, they didn't say.
Okay.
They didn't.
Okay. What about any foot searches by humans? Go looking in that direction, go much farther than the dogs did. Going in, because there are houses, there are buildings with people in them and around the area, some businesses and things. Did people kind of fan out in different directions or not?
Yes. I had one group together, and then Joe had another group, and then somebody else had another group. We actually went over to Ludlow Falls, which is not too far. Well, you got to go through another town, but we went over there thinking maybe he was over there thinking, because at that there was something that happened a long time ago where he thought he was back in the military. This was before he got on meds, that he went low crawling in some mud and stuff, and Mom and Dad found him. I forgot about that.
Wow. But
that was before he was on his medication and everything, until he got leveled out.
Okay. All right, so there's that incident as well. Okay, so you're going looking around, and in the process, of course, kind of a populated area, so maybe you're going to find man-made things anyway. Anything that you found in any of those searches that could have been connected to David?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Okay. Let's move on to this. Now, we're going to get a little deeper now into the house, being that you were there very quickly. I mean, you were like the first person on the scene, and then, of course, Joe and Seth came over. Of course, we can't forget the neighbor that came over as well. But you told me something about David's clothes. Of course, you're living with him. You kind of know maybe his clothes situation. You were living with him for a couple weeks. But what can you say about his clothes?
There was a lot of his clothes and a lot of shaving stuff that was missing that I noticed when I went to pack stuff up. When I couldn't afford the rent on my own because I wasn't. I had just gotten my job and stuff, and so I couldn't afford it on my own. So I think it was about a month or two after Dave disappeared that I started packing everything up, and a lot of his clothes were gone, his pants and shirts were gone, and then there was a duffel bag that I noticed that was gone, because I remember him having a green duffel bag from the military, and that wasn't found there either. All
right, so you're living there for a while. Maybe you're just thinking, well, he's going to come back, right? I guess you were there thinking, he's going to come back. Maybe just having some sort of episode. Somebody's going to find him somewhere, maybe in another state. Maybe he's homeless or something, but somebody would find him and then bring him back to Ohio. That's what you're thinking.
Yes.
That's why you didn't go through his stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but then eventually you found that in his drawers or whatever, most of his clothes were missing.
Yes.
Okay.
There was also, now this is another thing, that he left his wedding ring right on the dresser, where he kept all of his clothes and everything.
Right.
Yeah, no clothes there that I knew that was his. Most of the clothes that were there was Julie's.
Okay. Did you notice that wedding ring was sitting there right away, or of course, or any sort of jewelry like that's not very big, and maybe I don't know if you'd be looking for that type of thing anyway. I think this is the first time we've ever talked about a wedding ring on Unfound, 7.5 years in. But that was something you noticed at the time, or did it take you a few days to realize that?
No, I noticed that immediately.
Okay.
When I did do a little bit of search around, and maybe he left a note or something. So I was thinking, look everywhere to see if I could find a note and stuff. I even told the police, come on in and look, see if you can find anything and everything.
Right. Yeah, because the wedding ring, and we should establish, David did usually wear his wedding ring.
Yes, he did.
Did he ever? I know this is very personal, but did he ever? Maybe some people might take it off when they take a shower or something, in case it doesn't fall off and go down the drain or something. Anything like that?
He might have did that.
Might have done that.
He might.
I have to ask because I know maybe the listeners thinking, well, that's a really crazy question. My dad, of course, was married for over 50 years. Of course, my mother is now deceased. But he never wore a wedding ring, and not because he was running around or anything, but he just was never into any jewelry. He's very much like, I don't wear anything like that either. Of course, I'm not married, but no watches, no, anything like that. I hate anything metal on my body. I hate it. My dad's kind of the same way. So he never wore his wedding ring, so that's why I needed to ask. But David did wear his wedding ring.
Yes, he wore his wedding ring, and he also wore a necklace with a cross on it. Okay. And he liked jewelry a little bit. He didn't have a lot of jewelry, but he liked wearing jewelry. Yes.
Okay, but the cross, this necklace or whatever, it's missing.
Yes.
So if he went missing, it went missing. All right. So this green duffel bag, clothes are missing. His wedding ring's still there. Regarding the phone was still there, but like we established, you didn't find it. One of those other guys found it. And maybe I'll ask you right at this point. Did you look through the phone to see if anybody that he could have called and text? We're gonna get back to some older texts later, but just for that morning, did he call anybody? Of course, we know his mother called him, but did you ever look at his phone to see who recent communication was with?
No, I didn't.
Okay. No. Okay. Do you know if the police collected that phone? Do you know where that phone is now?
Yeah,
they did.
Yes, the phone is with the detective in Miami County.
Okay, very good.
And now my sister, she did see some text in there that she actually grabbed his phone and started looking through it and stuff. I personally didn't do that, but she did. And she said there was some suspicious activity on his text messages.
All right, we'll get into that in a little later. Well, surely. Now, you also said his shaving stuff was missing.
Yes.
Like a razor and maybe shaving cream, that's what you noticed. Dave, the type of guy to shave every day or once every 3 days? Do you even know?
Every day. Because he didn't like to have a goatee or nothing on his face.
All right. He's like me then. Okay. But there is a discrepancy with the wallet. Why don't you explain why the information with the wallet is a bit conflicting?
Well, I remember going into his bedroom and just seeing the wedding ring, and there was nothing else on the dresser. But when I talked to Seth about it, Seth swore that his wallet was there on the dresser. And I don't remember his wallet being there whatsoever. I looked all over that place for his wallet because that's one of the main things to see if he left his wallet behind, and I did not find it anywhere. Even when I packed everything up, there was no wallet found. But Seth swears his wallet was on the dresser.
But it's missing now, 4 years later.
Yes.
Okay, so his phone was there, wedding ring is there, but his wallet is missing 4 years later. But you claim, of course, you were the first person to get to the house. You didn't see it, but when Seth and Joe got there later, Seth insists that the wallet was there.
When I didn't talk to Seth about it at that time. Mm-hmm. It was about 6 months later that I talked to Seth on the phone, and he swore that he seen his wallet. But I'm wondering if, because we seen his wedding ring, and I said his wedding ring's right here, maybe he misunderstood what I had said. I don't know.
Okay. But, all right. But you were pretty sure, being that you were the first person on the scene, you did not see his wallet.
No, I did not.
0. Okay. Let's move on to this. So we got some things going on in the house: the clothes, the wedding ring, this phone. The wallet, was it there? Was it not? I'm inclined. I'm going to believe you, Daryl, because you were the first on the scene. I don't think you would miss something like that. Of course, if it really was just sitting there in the open, as Seth described, maybe, of course, it was well down the road. Who knows? Maybe he saw your wallet sitting on the table or something, or Joe's wallet sitting on the table. That wasn't actually David's. We come up with a lot of different stories there. Let's move on to this. Now, one of the neighbors, and I'm not sure which house it is, they had one of those Ring cameras or had security cameras on the front of the house. What did it show?
According to the detective, it showed, they went around to every house and did the investigation and found out that, a guy down the street had one of those. So he confiscated, or asked him if he could see the footage, and it showed that Dave came in, closed the garage door, and no one ever left out the front until I got home.
So, but when you say Dave came home, what we're talking about is a car. He was in his wife's car.
Yes, he was in his wife's car.
All right, so I know we have to be very technical about this. The car goes by this camera, and the camera can actually see David's garage door.
Yes,
it can. It's okay. So it's like right across. This place is right across the street, and we don't want to give out any address or anything. But it's good enough that we know that the camera's pointed out on the street, but just happens to also catch, Dave's place, and it shows the car going into the garage. But technically, you can't really tell who's driving, right?
No.
The camera.
According to, I found out this later that from a detective that, I don't know which house that the detective went to. I have no idea. They never released that information to me, so I want to make sure that you know that.
Yeah.
So I have no idea which house it was that had the camera.
Okay. So I got to ask, so you've never walked, I know you live there. Now, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you've never walked on that side of the street to see which one of those houses actually has a camera?
No, I didn't.
Haven't. Okay. All right, so we have the story, car coming back with, did the police give you a time estimate of when this happened?
No, they didn't.
Because we have to remember, we have this story that your mother called him and he said he was at home and trying to figure out, was he telling the truth? I think she would have noticed maybe if he was driving in a car, because you can kind of hear the background and everything. So you have to piece that together. Presumably, I guess, if we're believing Dave, is that he did drive home from Joe's in his wife's car, in Dave's wife's car, and went in there, and then after that, your mother called him. But certainly something else could be possible, because we have to remember we don't know who was driving Dave's car. All we know is the car.
Yes.
Anything unusual? Maybe I'll ask you, is anything unusual about the car? Did you ever take a look at the car? And anything unusual, anything missing out of it?
No, me and Seth and Joe kind of looked through it and didn't find anything out of the ordinary.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. And then, so he pulls in there, and then just to remind everybody to put this in the timeline, what time do you think you got back to Dave's place that morning, roughly?
9:30 or 10.
Okay. So once again, we're talking about 2.5, 3 hours. Something went on in that time. Okay. Let's move on to Joe, and we have to talk about these things because you've seen them, you've experienced them, Daryl, so I have to ask you about them. First of all, did Joe go to the funeral?
Yes, he did.
He showed up. Okay, so he was
Him
there.
Him and his brother.
He and his brother. Very good. Now, there is this story, though, that he was asking you about a leather jacket that David had. Please tell the listeners. Of course, you experienced this firsthand, so you were there. What was the conversation?
Well, the day that Dave went missing, Joe mentioned to me that he would like to have Dave's jacket, and I said, well, Dave, we only know where Dave's is. I'm not giving you his jacket. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I wanted to put Dave's picture on it to remember him by. That's the very day that Dave went missing. And then at the funeral home, before we even went inside, he had come up to me again and tried to ask me about the jacket too, again, to see if he could get the jacket to put Dave's picture on. I just thought it was really weird. And he wanted to be a pallbearer too. And I said, no, we already got enough pallbearers for Julie.
Okay, well, maybe the pallbearer thing's not so unusual. But he's asking, so what you're saying is that the very day when you show up there, you notice Dave's missing, and then Seth and Joe show up. Joe asked you that very day about that leather jacket.
Yes, he did.
All right, so within hours of Dave going missing.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I realized what his story was, that wanted to put this picture on it or something. Okay, maybe that very well could be that's what he wanted to do. But just in general, we all know when people start asking about missing persons things very quickly, it does seem a little strange. All right, next point, Dave's truck. We have to remember that Joe had Dave's truck. In your estimation, how long did Joe have David's truck before Dave went missing? Any guess?
I'm thinking at least 4 months.
A long time.
Yeah.
A long time.
Yes.
Was this because Dave just let him borrow it, or was this some sort of arrangement, or did Dave ever explain that to you? Hey, Dave, why does Joe have your truck, and what was Dave's explanation?
There was something that my mom told me, now this is coming from my mom, that Dave agreed to let him use his truck because of his being down. But the conversation was supposed to be that he would get another vehicle or get that one fixed or whatever. But as far as I know, according to my mom, that Joe was actually paying Dave rental to help him out on the lease on that vehicle.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it was per month or per week. I'm not sure how that arrangement, but I do remember my mom saying that.
Okay. So it wasn't just it possibly wasn't a Dave let Joe borrow his truck for a while. There might have been some financial motive for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Your opinion, Joe having Dave's truck, did he take care of it? Did he keep it in good shape?
No, it was pretty much trash on the inside. I mean, there was trash all over the place. There was trash in his bed of his truck. There was actually like trash, bags of trash in his bed of his truck that Joe had thrown in there. I have no idea why.
Okay. All right, so he has this truck for, at least some months. That's your best estimation. That's good enough for a conversation here. But then it did turn out, and I think this is where you were going when you talked about your sister a few minutes ago, about some texts that were eventually found on Dave's phone between Dave and Joe, and the topic was the truck. You saw these texts?
I didn't actually see him. My sister told me about him. Mm-hmm. The text actually said, Dave actually on the text, quoting my sister, is that the text actually said that Dave told him that he's given him until a certain date, and I'm not sure what the date was, that he wanted his back. He wanted his truck back, and he needed his truck back, and that I guess him and Joe got a heated discussion on there, and Joe told him that he couldn't give it back, that he had to have a vehicle, and Dave said, well, I don't care, you got to figure something out because I want my truck back by this date. And that's what I was told from my sister.
Okay. Did your sister ever say, recognize the date on that conversation? Was that a week before Dave's disappearance, a month before? Did she say? Do you know?
A day or two.
Just a day or two?
Yes.
Okay. Of course, Dave goes missing, and what happened to that truck? Did Joe give it back after Dave went missing, or what happened?
Mom kept on to him about giving the truck back, but I think a week or two later, I think it might have been closer to 2 weeks, that Mom just called him up and told him, gave him an ultimatum, you bring the truck back or we call the police on you for keeping Dave's truck. And then Joe ended up bringing it back under he really didn't want to bring it back, but once Mom mentioned she was going to call the police on him having Dave's truck, like thieving his truck, then he finally gave in like 3 days later and brought it back to Mom.
So Joe did eventually give the truck back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
All right, and being that you still live in the area, and maybe some of your other family lives in the area, do you still interact with him? Joe, is he around? What's he doing? Seth as well. Do you talk to these guys over the last 4 years?
I had talked to Joe a little bit, but it's been a long time. It's been like 2-3 years since I talked to Joe.
All right.
About 2 years for Seth. Seth, as far as I know, is living around here now. But Joe, last time I heard, he was in Mississippi.
Oh, he moved.
Yes, and he moved very quickly after the funeral, and after Dave. I think it was within 3 months he moved to Mississippi.
Okay. I think that's something else maybe that we need to keep in mind, just to kind of be a devil's advocate regarding Joe, is that, it very well may be that Joe's thinking, well, you lent me, or whatever the situation is, your truck, and, now that your wife's deceased, you don't need a vehicle. You can drive her a vehicle, and I can continue to drive her truck. It very well could be that Joe might have just been upset about that, thinking, you're by yourself now. You don't need 2 vehicles. Very well could be that. I realize how it looks, but it very well could have been heat of the moment type of thing. And we also have to realize this is not a recorded conversation. We have a text. It's hard maybe to put the correct emotions. With texting, we've all done texting, and we realize what we write and what we're thinking maybe doesn't show the emotions. All we know is that Dave was asking for his truck back, and Joe seemed to be resistant to it, at least at that moment.
Yes.
Okay. And then was it you, or you said your sister was the one communicating with Joe to get the truck back?
My mom.
Your mom?
My mom was.
Okay. All right. But Dave or Joe eventually did give the truck back. And where is that truck now?
It got turned back into the leasing company.
It did.
Actually, car and the truck was leased.
Oh, okay.
And then, no payment, and we can't touch any money that Dave has.
Right.
It got turned back in because Dave paid that out of his debit card.
Okay. So the car and the truck are gone.
Yes.
Okay.
They got turned by
Okay.
leasing companies.
All right. I'm going to ask you, it's not on the outline, but I'm going to ask you about this. This certainly could be a situation. Of course, we have clothes missing. We have a wallet missing. We have a phone left behind. We have a wedding ring left behind. It could be certainly believable that Dave went off all by himself. I think this is something that, that I realize, I might think something else, but certainly given the clothes and everything, really leaning toward, I'm not telling what to think, but we have to talk about it. And being, especially since Dave had gone off and taken a couple trips unexpectedly on his own before. What are some of the characteristics? What are some of the things that Dave was into? Let's say he's out there somewhere. It's 4 years later. He's been able to survive on the streets or doing something. What are some of the things that people might recognize about him? Any idiosyncrasies, anything like that, when you think about your brother that maybe somebody might recognize should they run into somebody who might be Dave on the street? Anything like that?
Well, he did wear his glasses a lot, because he couldn't hardly see, he had bad vision. Didn't eyeglasses. And also he had 2 tattoos, one on each arm. One was an Indian scene, and then another one was like a skull with hair flipped over the skull.
Huh.
I'm not sure what arm they was on.
Okay.
But yeah, he had 2 tattoos. They were both pretty big on each shoulder, kind of like the shoulder part, arm.
Okay. Maybe I should go back and ask you this as well. When you went in there and noticed he wasn't around and looking around and everything, did he take his medication with him? If he left by himself, of course, clothes, bag missing, was the medication still there?
The medication was still there.
It was.
They had a toolbox of drugs, and pretty much all of his medication was there as far as I knew. No.
Okay. So then let me ask you this then. When did you ever encounter, over the years, it doesn't have to be near his disappearance, but in the years that he had been diagnosed with this, everybody who knew him well, knew that he had this. When he would be having one of these episodes, how would he act? Would he talk about anything in particular when he was having one of these episodes? This is just an example of, people maybe going through some mental health issue. They may become very conspiratorial, like, for example, like the government's after them or something like that. Was Dave like that, or when he was having one of these episodes, maybe he didn't take his medication as quick or right as he should? What would he start talking about? What would his fascinations be under these conditions? Do you remember?
Well, I could notice that when the drug was wearing off, a month or two later, when he was getting ready to get his other shot, that he he let a lot of people run over him and he did whatever he wanted to because he was nervous about everything, stuff like that. I did notice that.
Okay. So there wasn't any particular topic or topics that would come to mind, that he would obsess upon under this situation?
No,
nothing that jumps out at you. Okay. All right, and once again, he had the green duffel bag and with seemingly clothes and things missing. So, all right. I should go back and ask you this one more thing about the neighbor who came over and turned off the music. Was this the first time the neighbor ever did this? Did he ever have any complaints, or maybe it's a she? Ever have any complaints about Dave playing music too loud?
No, and he did mention to me afterwards, it wasn't that at that time, but he did tell me later on that he had never had Dave do that before. It had never been a complaint, never. Dave always kept his music down. He never played it loud at all.
Okay. You being that you lived with him for a few weeks, how common was it that radio would be on?
He liked to sit out back and just, it was open field or, look, he liked to relax out back. Yeah. There wasn't no fire pit out there or nothing. He just liked to sit out there and listen to music, pretty much.
Okay, so it's not, it would not have been unusual for the radio to be on. It's just unusual of what the neighbor said, how loud it was that particular morning.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And we have to establish one more thing maybe about this this camera that's somewhere in the neighborhood that's focused on the building, that the car is seen going in, but nobody is seen walking away, whether it's Dave or any other person, at least on camera.
Yes.
Okay. All right. How difficult has this been? Of course, I'm talking to you. You have all of these siblings. Of course, you're the biological sibling, but still, of course, all these other kids adopted. It's a fantastic story there. How has this affected all of you over the past, it's just over 4 years. How has it been? How often does Dave's name come up? How often do you talk about him? What's it been like the last 4 years?
We talk about him all the time about, wish we knew something or wish that he was here with us because we miss him so much and everything. And that pretty much my sister, we were both bulldogs when it first happened. She was trying to find out this and that and find out different things. And she wouldn't pass flyers out over where she lived, and I passed flyers out and stuff, and it's just like there ain't nothing that ever came of anything, but we miss him so much that, we used to have fun together. I mean, even at Christmas time, you would have wrestling matches.
Right.
Got it all on video, and Dick almost actually fell into and I caught him before he fell into TV. I said, "You all right?" And he said, "Well, maybe I better sit down because I younger kids doing it ain't nothing like us older guys doing it." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yes. Right. So he comes up.
Right in the living room where we had the wrestling match, and you know how guys do. We think we're better than anybody else, and we can wrestle. And my brothers were all into wrestling back in the day, younger ones, anyways.
Okay. So he's on your minds a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot.
And you said who actually lives now? You or your youngest brother now lives in the actual place where Dave and his wife lived. Which one of you lives in it now?
My youngest brother.
Your youngest brother.
There.
Okay. Is it kind of, I got to ask, being that when you go over to your youngest brother's and walk in there, is it kind of creepy? You think about Dave and all the times you were in there with him? You know what?
Yeah, a little bit. I really do. Now, when it first happened, I couldn't stay there. I don't know. It's just eerie, really weird, eerie feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had a thing where I felt like that if I would sleep there and then he would come back, I'd get scared or something. I don't know. It's just paranoia a little bit with me, I guess.
Okay.
Okay.
And how does your youngest brother feel about living in that place where Darren is? I guess it's working out for him, and I'm happy. It's always nice to keep something in the family like that. But how does he feel about it?
He likes it. He likes it over there, so he don't have any complaints or anything, really.
Okay. All right.
Now, he was a little bit younger when Dave disappeared, so, he was living at my mom and dad's. He was still like in his late teens when he lived there, so he don't remember a lot about, and him and Dave wasn't really that close, to be honest.
Okay. Gotcha.
Other than us getting together for get-togethers and stuff like that.
And we have to remember there's like a 30-year age gap.
Yes.
Right. That doesn't help either. I mean, both of you are Gen Xers like me, and he's in his 20s, which would make him, I don't know, millennial or whatever they call him, Gen Z or something. So different tastes in music and culture and everything else. So maybe that's not unusual.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. First of all, before we complete this interview, I need to thank former guest Julian, who put me in contact, right? You know Julian, correct, Daryl?
I don't know personally, but I'm on the Facebook Unidentified People.
Yes.
And that's how he got in contact with me and told me about you.
All right, great. Well, I have to, and if everybody's wondering, well, who's Julian? Julian was the guest for the Judy Brown and Richard Riesenberg disappearances from the 1970s in New York City, where if you don't know this, maybe you're finding this out for the first time, Daryl. Judy Brown was Julian's cousin, and she went missing in the 1970s with this guy Richard Riesenberg, who was a convicted murderer, and they're both still missing. So we had covered that disappearance. I'm looking on my list here. That was disappearance number 285 that we covered on Unfound, and we're now up to 329. So it's been a little while since Julian was on, but he and I keep in contact, and I'm so thankful that he reached out to you, and we've gotten to speak here today. By the way, the interview was done on April 21st of 2024. Any final words, Daryl, before we complete this interview?
Just that we love my brother so much, and we hope that something comes about on finding him. We all miss him so much, and either way, we want to know for closure purposes that what happened or what where he's at.
Okay.
Stuff.
Daryl, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that was my April 21st, 2024 interview with Daryl Fugate, brother of David Fugate. I thank him for joining me and all of you on this episode. As I stated in the interview, I made a map video for this disappearance. Please check it out on Unfound's YouTube channel. Some of Unfound's most astute listeners may remember that we've covered a few other disappearances where vehicles became a point of contention. Can you name at least a couple of them? Take a moment. If Sandy Knipe and Andy Chapman came to mind, you're exactly right. And I think there are a few others. Situations where missing people's vehicles ended up in some other people's possessions somehow. And yes, I think in most of those cases, foul play has certainly been considered by both myself and many of you. Meaning, if you're thinking that Joe having David's truck and not wanting to give it back could have caused David's disappearance, that makes all the sense in the world. David's over there, an argument starts, and something happens, maybe even unintentional. Then Joe drives David's wife's car back to the house. Yet, I think we must look at this from Joe's point of view. If it's true that he was paying Dave to use the truck, and Joe knew he was doing so Dave could even own a truck in the first place, I can see why Joe might be ticked off that Dave's family demanded he give Dave's truck back. Not saying he was correct, but I would understand his frustration. So at least how Joe acted toward Dave's family, I'm not sure that is necessarily suspicious. However, the concern is the text between Dave and Joe. Dave wanting the truck back and Joe not wanting to give it back right before Dave went missing. What's clear to me is Dave wanted the truck back because his wife died. That the texts occurred and Julie died the day before is surely not a coincidence. We might consider that Dave wanted the truck back so he could sell it to finance the funeral. There's a problem, though. That truck was leased. It was not Dave's. It was the leasing company's. Still, I think Dave wanted the truck back because Julie died. What is in Joe's favor, though, is Dave was alive the next morning, even though Dave went over to Joe's the night before. You would think that if violence would have occurred, it would have happened when Dave arrived the night before, and not the next morning. Because we can't imagine that Dave might have gone over to Joe's for the expressed purpose of getting the truck back. Yet, Dave talked to his mother on the morning of the 29th. Likewise, if Joe is responsible, then that means he set up Dave's house to make it look like Dave took off. Is this reasonable? You be the judge. All we can really say for sure is there was a funeral and a disappearance. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of David Fugate, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, sign up, and partake in the Unfound blog. Of course, you get some other things by signing up as well. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.